All right, thank you everybody for being here. It is Monday, November 29th at 10 o'clock, and we have the Governor's Workforce Council. Oh, now we're recording, and I'll kick it off to Derek if Senator Slatt, my co-chair, if he has any opening remarks.
I just hope that everybody had a great Thanksgiving. It's good to see my colleagues, even if it's virtually. It's great to see everyone, and looking forward to learning about the latest initiatives and what's happening at the Workforce Council, and it'll help inform us, I'm sure, for next session and beyond for things that we need to be aware of and work on together. So good to see everyone. And Representative Elliott, I'll hand it back to you if you want to do maybe introductions of, give everybody a chance to say hello.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll kick it off next to Senator Witkos, our ranking member.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Derek. Great to see everybody. Happy holidays. Looking forward to seeing the work that the Office of Workforce Strategy has completed since we passed the bill last legislative session, and see what we need to do to make sure that Connecticut's positioned for the next generation of workers and make sure we're meeting all the needs, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Senator. It looks like our ranking member, Representative Haynes, is not here, and Representative Turco, Vice Chair. Would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Chairman Elliott. I'll just echo the words of a lot of my colleagues. I'm excited to see what the Office of Workforce Strategy is going to present today. I've been reading a lot of positive news about new businesses and companies coming here to Connecticut, current ones expanding, and the role of our workforce in that. And some of the reasons that these companies are choosing Connecticut is because we have one of the most highly educated and trained workforces. But I know there's several areas where we are lacking as well, and we need to do better as a state. So I'm excited to do the work as the legislature and partner with the governor's office in that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Turco. So today we have presenting Kelly Marie Valeris of the Chief Workforce Officer, Office of Workforce Strategy, and the Vice Chair of the Governor's Workforce Council. We'll also have Niall Demondo, who's the Chief of Staff of the Office of Workforce Strategy, presenting as well, and Mark Argosh, who is the Chair of the Governor's Workforce Council, who will be joining us momentarily. So Kelly Marie, feel free to take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Very much looking forward to sharing with you all the work that we've been doing this past year, and then the opportunities for the upcoming year. So we put together an agenda for you today. We're going to give you a brief overview of the strategic plan and some changes and additions to the plan. Share with you the committee reorganization and the new council members. Niall's going to give you a brief overview of the legislative recap. I know all of you were very close to that. It's just more of a reminder of where we landed at the end of last year with all of the different initiatives that we had going. And then an update on the strategic plan, specifically focusing on Career Connect, which is a $70 million of ARPA funds that were allocated to our office for short-term training programs. And then the interagency partnerships that we have developed over this year and the work that's being done in those partnerships across the state. And if there's anything that I missed that you want to hear about, just please let me know. So we'll jump right into the overview of the strategic plan. So as you know, we developed the plan in October of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. We had about 400 people volunteering to sit on different subcommittees and work on the development of the plan and then the implementation of the plan over the last year. So we're really excited that we've also made a couple strategic tweaks to the plan to improve upon the 19 individual initiatives that we had going forward. So next slide, please. This slide is the reorganization of the 19 individual initiatives that we had. So as we started, working to implement the plan, as you can imagine, 19 individual initiatives is a lot to handle, and a lot of those initiatives were like subcomponents of larger initiatives. So what we've done here is we've taken the strategic plan and we've broken it up into these 5 areas. The first being business leadership. And business leadership, we have engaged at a very high level. It's amazing to see the number of CEOs and presidents of organizations across the state who have raised their hand to say, we need to take a bigger part and a responsibility for ensuring that we have the workforce that we need, and not only helping to inform the programming that is necessary, whether that's short-term training programs, high school curriculum, community college and 4-year institution curriculum. They're also saying that we need to change the way we engage our employees. And this is something that I think is a different conversation than I have heard in the past. So what we've done here is how we're organizing the business leadership is in these regional sector partnerships. So we now have 8 regional sector partnerships launched across the state of Connecticut. There's 4 in manufacturing in our model, and then there's also in the capital region a pre-existing manufacturing regional sector partnership. So we've kind of folded them in. So we have 5 across the state. We have an IT and a tech-enabled industry sector partnership in the Hartford region and in the Southwest region. And we have a bioscience partnership in the South Central region, New Haven region. Very excited about the level of engagement of companies in each of these sector partnerships. We have between 30 and 50 organizations in each one of these, and they're really driving the conversation on what is in demand and necessary in their region and in their industry sector. So just briefly, these are organized around industry sectors in which there's a core group of partners that include the workforce boards, other economic organizations, mostly the chambers of commerce, our educational partners, whether that's post-secondary and secondary institutions, and community organizations. And they all came together to say, what industries have the biggest footprint and need in our region to have these sector partnerships. And then they launched them. So as I said, we have 8 that have been launched, and we will have more coming. So there's healthcare sector partnerships that are being developed, and I perceive that we'll have healthcare sector partnerships in all 5 sectors in the next year. We may be looking at expansion of IT sector partnerships. I'm sure we're going to end up with infrastructure partnerships. So these are an ongoing initiative, and we'll be continuously launching new sectors as they're needed in those regions to have this concerted effort. But around these conversations, the business leaders are telling the sector partners what is it that they need, instead of these organizations going to businesses and saying, this is what we think you need, and this is what we have to offer you. It's a different conversation. So I went 2 Fridays ago to a Southwest manufacturing quarterly meeting, and it was their first in-person meeting. Really amazing to see what's happening there. And just in that region alone, they're planning a major outreach campaign, put together a highly professional marketing campaign to reach people in manufacturing for awareness and opportunities. They've built an amazing website that's supportive not only of students and job seekers, but also to help their business to business supporting each other. And they're also working to put together really robust regional career awareness and fairs across the state of Connecticut, kind of similar to the aerospace component manufacturers program that they run and they have in last month. So great there. And they're also being very engaged in this conversation around skills-based hiring, to be looking at their hiring practices different, and not just based on credentials, but based on what is the skills that someone needs to be able to do this job effectively, and hiring them based on those skills, not so much based on, I have a 4-year degree and 5 years of experience in the field. So that's really providing an opportunity for us to have more diversity, equity, and inclusion in these organizations. We are engaging businesses on the conversation around quality jobs. We're adding this to our agenda this year. I think that the companies are really already embracing this idea of a quality job. And quality job means that, that people are valued in what they do. They are recognized at what they do. They have opportunities for increasing their education and their ability to move up within an organization, those types of things. We've also been working closely with Advanced CT on campus CT and retaining our college grads. And there's some great work that they're doing, and they're also engaging the regional sector partnerships there. So that is a really well-oiled machine at this point that is really functioning highly. And then we took out sector-based training that was included under the Education and Career Pathways program, and we stood it by itself. And we did this because obviously we have the ARPA dollars, we have the bond funding that was authorized, and I'm sure that there's going to be additional funding coming with the federal legislation around infrastructure and Build Back Better. And that this initiative, and we'll get more into the specifics, we're calling it Career Connect, and we'll share with you all of the planning that we have to support these industries that you see listed here as the major industries that are driving demand. But also there's a bunch of other industries that we're not forgetting about that will also be included in the sector-based training programs. And these are the short-term programs that get people short-term training with wraparound supportive services, case management, and are very connected to business leadership because we have the demand there, and that these people will go through these programs and have the opportunity to be placed at the end of those programs. The other really robust work that we're doing is on education and career pathways. And we're really focusing on building out the pathways. And the other components that we had under this initiative in the original design, we've incorporated as components to get us to this pathway part. And this is really important because we're looking at building out dual credit and dual enrollment programs in high schools, but also ensuring that students have the opportunity to earn these college credits, but also have the opportunity to earn industry recognized credentials, such as a Google certificate, right? So not necessarily credit at this moment, but has that really high valued industry recognized credential. The goal here is that students become not only college ready, but career ready. And those 9,000 to 10,000 students a year who don't have a post-secondary plan have an opportunity to earn some college credits and gain some success early on, and maybe then change their mind and go to a post-secondary, or they can go right into the world of work. And so there's a lot going on here with regards to developing out program structures so that school systems can have some supports and structures in place to build out these pathway programs. And also that we have policies with the State Department of Ed that may or may not need legislation to support the requirement of schools to have pathway programs so that their students, again, are college and career ready. And there's a bunch of work that's happening here. And we're doing this work in very close partnership with the State Department of Ed. So I'm working closely with Deputy Commissioner Desi Nesmith and some of the team at State Department of Ed. Also, thanks to you, I'm sitting on the State Board of Ed. So I'm getting a really good understanding of what is happening on the education side of things, on the business side of things. And here's where we kind of bring those partnerships together. So I'll pause here. I know I threw a lot at you before I go over the next three. Is there any questions or comments that you have at this point?
Kelly, I had a question. Did you get a affirmative response from the federal government for the use of the ARPA funds. I know a lot of my communities have a lot of different wish lists, and they've been trying to get a definitive answer whether they can use ARPA funds for that. But you spoke a lot of different things, and sounds like the ARPA funds is going to be the main driver or source of funds. We get tentative approval from the feds that whatever we're trying to do here is going to meet the requirements.
Yes, we've gone through a very extensive, detailed vetting process of our proposals through the Office of Policy and Management, and they have been cross-checking those to the federal requirements. So we've had, several iterations in which they say, yep, so far, but we still need to answer these questions. So we did get a green light from OPM about 2 weeks ago with a few minor questions that we're going back to them with today. But overall, they have approved the use of our funding here. Now, with regards to the sector-based training programs, the key factor is those who have been most affected by COVID. So looking at how do we thread that needle at this point, right? Because you've got people who may have been out of work for the last year, but are now in work. But that work that they're in now may have been affected by COVID, and they may not be at the level in which they should be at had COVID not happened. So we're working to thread that needle to say, yes, even though they are working now, they're working in a job that is, a low wage job that doesn't have advancement opportunities, and that they were affected in that way because their opportunities were limited. So we are going to make sure that we're being as broad as we possibly can with regards to the people we're serving here.
How are we, and this is my last question, I'll let others. One of the things I'm seeing out there is, and we talk about low wage jobs, but they're jobs and usually in the hospitality area, and there's help wanted signs everywhere. They've even scaled back their hours of operation because they just can't find anybody. What we're proposing to do here, which I think is great, but how do we anticipate that impacting those hospitality businesses which are already struggling and trying to have people work for them and making their services available to the general public?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We've seen so many people fall out of employment, that they just are not part of the employment picture anymore, with a lot of people retired early. So that is definitely a concern. There's more job openings than there are people to fill them. One of the goals that we have is to get people upskilled and reskilled into the areas that are of interest to them personally, and that they have the skills and ability to be successful in those sectors, industry sectors, and then get them the training that they need to get into those entry-level jobs. We're also working with businesses for incumbent worker training. And one of the goals of the bond funding that was authorized was to use some of that funding for upskilling people when they're in those jobs. But not everyone is going to fit into kind of these career sector jobs that we're looking for. But as we're building this out, and in the Career Connect section, we're developing a statewide portal for all students and job seekers who want to get into training programs. And so it's modeled after what was done in Eastern Connecticut. In Eastern Connecticut, they now have 10,000 people in that portal who have said, I want job training in manufacturing. We're going to be sharing that portal across the state of Connecticut and adding all the other industry sectors to that. But one of the important things about that portal is they've actually placed more people without additional training than they've given training to. They just hit their 2,000 mark, people being trained and placed. But people who kind of figure like, I don't know where to go, I guess this sounds good, I'll put my name in the hat. When their name comes out on the other end with the workforce boards and a case manager meets them and talks to them, they could look at their resume and say, you've got these great skills and it matches these job openings that are over here. You don't really need this training. We can place you over here. So that's a really positive kind of byproduct, so to speak, of this kind of broader portal of people that we're going to be working with. So putting people where they're best suited, I guess, is the goal that we have, and trying to be equitable about the way we do that.
Okay, thank you.
Reb Ferrara, you had a question as well?
Yeah, hi Kelly, thank you so much. I just wanted to follow up a bit on your pathways focus, and it was great to hear some of the updates there. Could you comment a little bit on how I know kind of your diversity and equity inclusion lens kind of fits to this pathways focus? Because I'd be intrigued to hear kind of how you're trying to look at that, for instance, in the business leadership partnership. Because certainly the earlier that we start, especially kind of the exposure of girls and young women and our students of color to these fields is so critical. So I'm curious how you all are kind of implementing that concept.
Yeah, that's a great question and a really important point that I did not bring up when I was talking about this. The difference in the work that we're going to be doing here with Pathways is we're going to be engaging school districts, not just high schools. And then we're looking at a robust plan of career awareness or career awareness in elementary school. So just as kids are going through their curriculum, teachers just sharing with them that these are the jobs in the real world that are connected to the things that they're learning, the stories that they have. Another really important aspect of future success of students is ensuring that they are on grade level for reading and math. So in grade 3, we transition from learning to read to learn. And we need to make sure that's where we usually lose kids in grade 3. If they don't make that transition, they tend to fall behind and stay behind. So we've got to do some work around that. The other thing that we need to do in elementary school and throughout is ensure that our students are getting digital literacy skills. Currently, they're kind of like an add-on in high school. They go to the media center to learn digital literacy. Digital literacy is as important as reading, writing, and arithmetic is right now. And we need to make sure that our teachers understand how to implement that into all of their curriculum. So then when students move into middle school, that they're really doing a lot more awareness. What are the things that are interesting to me? What are the things that I'm good at? And how do those things mirror up to potential careers that I could have in the future? And then when I get into high school, kind of having a higher level of awareness through a process that we're calling having students developing career portfolios in middle school. I envision it almost like a Pinterest for kids on careers and interests and things that they're interested in, so that they're always thinking about that. And it becomes part of their curriculum within the schools. Like, here's a homework project, throw a couple things onto your idea board of things that interest you as you move forward, so that when they get into high school, they really start to have a clearer understanding of what is happening, what opportunities that they have in engaging in those. What we're doing with equity and diversity and inclusion, and this new committee was really stood up based on the feedback that we got when we launched our access and equity committee last year. We changed the name of that to barriers to employment, because we were really focused on childcare, transportation, benefits, cliffs, and we had people with disabilities under there as well. And that really wasn't targeted. It was targeted on specific barriers, not so much the barriers that certain populations have, right? So we have stood up this diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And I'll share now, I think, could we just skip ahead to that slide? And I can go, we can come back to that. There we go. So really excited about this committee. We have Sue Figurino, who is the COO of Travelers and also oversees their DEI committee for Travelers, and Jay Williams of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving as our co-chairs. We have 60 different community organizations that have been vetted and represent these special populations, these underrepresented populations. So we have a subcommittee under reentry, veterans, youth, persons with disability, and our BIPOC plus communities. And we have subcommittees that are working on the specific barriers that each of these underrepresented populations experience in trying to get back to work and be able to fully participate in workforce, right? Not just have those underpaid, low skilled jobs, but that they have real opportunity. So the committees are working to address kind of those issues that happen here. We've also been able to engage community members from each of these populations to be sitting on these committees. And we have secured funding through philanthropy to pay those community members to be part of these subcommittees. But also these will roll up the subcommittee steering group. We have members who will be overseeing the work of all of the other committees. And the reason being is that they're taking the equity lens to the work that we're doing in the other subcommittees to ensure that these underrepresented populations are being presented in the work that we're doing. So with regards to career pathway work, to your specific question is, people will be sitting on those committees to say, okay, what are we doing for people with disabilities? What are we doing for marginalized populations, specifically in each of those subcommittees? So I know that was kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, and I kind of gave a broader explanation of the other committee, but did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was helpful. And just seeing this slide, Kelly, it looks like the idea is that the underrepresented populations are infused in the subcommittees overall.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then kind of just building a little bit off of Senator Witkos's question of like kind of looking at where we are. I know one of the ongoing barriers you kind of noted to employment continues to be childcare, especially for women to get back into the workforce or to pursue training. So just wanted an update from your standpoint on where some of the real access issues and opportunities are, and in particular, if you've seen any developments with our Care for Kids dollars being able to go towards education and training.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really robust conversation happening around childcare, and Mark is leading that conversation. So since he was able to jump on, I'm going to throw that question over to Mark because he's much more adept to the details there.
Well, hi, everybody. Representative, I would say that, first of all, in terms of the training programs like Career Connect, offering kind of stipends for childcare and so on are going to be, are a critical part that's baked into the programming that the Office of Workforce Strategy is doing. Obviously, kind of the greater amount of money for Care for Kids will be really, really helpful in general in terms of helping people be able to get back into the workforce. We still see, and I think it was brought out in our last Governor's Workforce Council meeting, a huge gap among kind of working mothers in terms of labor force participation. So it's a huge challenge right now. I think what Kelly was referring to is that Beth Bai and the Office of Early Childhood team is starting to develop a strategic plan related to hopefully the additional dollars that could be coming through Build Back Better for universal pre-K and early childhood education, which we are very coordinated with them on. My other role is Executive Director of Social Venture Partners. We're working with the Office of Early Childhood because early childhood education is one of our main focuses on building out those plans. We're also organizing, this is part of a joint effort with the Lieutenant Governor and with the Governor's Workforce Council, a business coalition to support early childhood education. And then separately, there's Child Care for Connecticut's Future, which is an advocacy coalition, has launched. And there's going to be a big focus on engaging stakeholders, parents, childcare providers, schools, et cetera, in the development of the state plan for early childhood. But that's going to be a huge effort, by the way. I mean, that's to say we have an early childhood system in Connecticut would be kind of overstating what we have. I mean, it's really very fragmented. And we need, with a lot of providers who are undercompensated. And so there's a lot of work there to build the system, but we're super excited that with Build Back Better, Connecticut can really take the lead in the country on that. We're one of 9 states with an Office of Early Childhood. And so we really start much faster out of the starting gates on all of that. So I don't know, is that kind of what you were looking for? Good question.
Yeah, thanks. And if there's any follow-up, even just with data at another point of who's taken up on the Care for Kids dollars, I think that would just be helpful. But please go back to your presentation. I know I took us off course a little bit, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think Beth probably could answer that question much better than we could probably on the who's taking up the Care for Kids dollars in general.
For education and training. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And there's also a robust conversation that's happening with some of our business leaders across the state on the role that businesses play with regards to ensuring that their employees have good childcare. Great. And so that kind of covers, the DEI, the new DEI committee, and the barriers to entry. And then on top of all of that, obviously, is our data and performance, really making sure that we're creating the dashboards and the standard evaluation framework to be able to know exactly how the work that we're doing and the dollars that we're spending, what the outcomes of those are. It's important for us to be able to measure that so that we can bring it back to you and be accountable to the work that we're doing and the dollars we're spending, but also to really be able to know what works and what doesn't work, what changes need to be made based on outcomes. So, we learned a few things in the first round of the CARES Act dollars that we spent that are being, implemented into the Career Connect program. We're also working closely with the Department of Labor to enhance the CT Hires platform. It's got a lot more opportunities for it to be user-friendly, and we're working with them on that. We're also working to build out a credential registry, and we've gotten through an initial round of some funding with the New England Board of Higher Ed, have cataloged the manufacturing programs. And we're also working closely with DAS on the My Connecticut Journey, which is that program that any student or job seeker will be able to log on and ask questions and be kind of taken through the different resources that are available to them to map out what their career trajectory will be based on different training programs and opportunities that they have. So in a brief nutshell, I guess that is the reorganization of the work that we're doing. Like I said, we didn't take anything off the table. We've managed it into better working groups that make it easier to control and more effective for us to push these agendas forward. Okay. Any other questions? So we'll move to the expanded size of the Governor's Workforce Council. So we basically doubled the size of the council based on legislation. The people in green are the new additions to our committee. And I believe that we have a few community members who are going through the final vetting process, and we'll be adding them to this. And I think that is about it for the open slots that we have. But I think we're really excited to see the expansion of the council and the engagement that we have, not only with the existing members, who all but 1 or 2 of them are no longer on the council due to their either moving, retiring, and the rest have stayed on the council. So we're excited about that.
How did you end up picking the folks on the council?
So we had a pretty robust kind of conversation around for the businesses to ensure that we had the major business sectors represented, different size businesses represented across different regions of the state, and then as much diversity as we could in those. And Mark was really instrumental in vetting all of them. So I'll give him an opportunity to share.
Well, we worked with organizations like the CBIA and the state AFL-CIO and the regional workforce boards and many others to get their nominations. So we really were working very much to kind of get broader representation geographically, certainly to pay attention to the kind of diversity of the council, and also to kind of be able to bring in some industry sectors to get some broader community-based representation, and obviously also to get some community members on the council. And so virtually everybody that we've asked has said yes. So we didn't have any lack of interest in it. And it was really a matter of consulting with these other organizations per the legislation that existed, but also even kind of expanding upon it to make sure that we got a truly broader, more broadly representative council here.
Well, I would just make a recommendation, because the two members that you have from the General Assembly are from the same political party. So if you want to really give a broad thing, you ought to think about reaching across the aisle and ask for additional participants.
Yeah, there are certain items. Thank you for your feedback on that. There are certain items I would just say that Kelly and I really couldn't, in control here. But we're certainly open to your idea.
Well, Mark, when we're talking about that, I mean, I can look at, you have a member from the Senate Democrat Caucus and a member from the House Democrat Caucus on there, and they're using their position as a member of the Connecticut General Assembly, but you don't have any Republicans on there. And I don't think that, to start off, if we're trying to do a broad-based bipartisan effort, it just doesn't look good on the surface.
Yeah, no,
we agree with you. I think we could not choose who was going to be in these positions. The leads of the House and Senate chose. To your point, we did have Tony Wang on our council last year, and he was not selected to be reappointed to the council. And I do believe he added a lot to our council in the conversations that we had, and he was missed to be appointed here. That is something, through legislation, it was stated that the leaders of each of the houses they chose. Maybe that's something that you might want to consider in legislation this year, is tweaking that to say that one needs to be from a Republican and one a Democrat. Could be helpful.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that to our attention. I know that's not how we operate on this committee, and that's why I think we were able to put together a good product. It just, for somebody that's involved in politics, it's glaring to me that happened. So
it was glaring to us as well. We unfortunately had our hands tied. So
yes, Representative Wood.
Yeah, thank you very much. How exactly did you have your hands tied? I agree with Senator Witkos. I think it's irresponsible, quite frankly, not to have more of a political balance. I look at all these names and virtually all of them are Democrats.
Because the bill itself that was passed specifically stated who had rights to appoint people or recommend people to the council. And on the legislative side, it specifically gave the responsibility to the leaders.
Though I see in green ink are all the new members.
Right.
So was that in legislation as well, or was that at will for your commission?
If in each, the legislation very specifically stated, represented the number of council members in any given category, such as labor or business or community representatives or mayors. And then within that, there were different groups that had kind of consulting rights in the legislation. So for example, labor was effectively kind of controlled by labor, and so on. But on the legislative, for the two legislative representatives, that was very specific in the legislation that was passed. So we literally had no ability to kind of influence it. I mean, no ability to kind of, change it. Kelly and I were very happy with having bipartisan representation.
So just to be clear, all the new names in green, are those replacements from people that originally served on this commission?
No, they're ads because the size of the council was doubled essentially. And so, as Kelly said, we had almost no replacements to the existing ones. I think one or two, because of moving, kind of dropped off. So the existing membership was retained. And then all the green reflects those additional new members based upon the specific legislation saying you have to have X number of labor people, X number of community people, and it kind of broke it down into different categories. So we work within the confines of the legislation and then broadly went out to try to get broad representation. So as I said, for the business ones, we went to the CBIA and other business organizations and really kind of, it wasn't kind of Kelly and myself or some small group, in the governor's office figuring it out. It was really kind of seeking kind of input from others. But we were limited in terms of how many seats per category. And then in some instances, like, on the legislative ones, it very specifically said who had the right to appoint them, who were the leaders in the House and Senate.
Okay, I will look at that language. It appears that you've got probably a third new members on this that you had at will choice to add. So I think the legislation is tight in some ways and not so tight or specific in other ways. I think there's leeway. It appears there's leeway. So I look forward to looking at the language and understanding a little more and hopefully creating a little more bipartisan effort on this. I do have a question, if I may, for Kelly on her previous slide. Is Kelly there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great presentation. It's a wonderful step for our state. Did you look in your investigation on the dual degree programs? Did you look at the Norwalk P-TECH program, Norwalk High School P-TECH program?
Absolutely. It's a fantastic program.
Yes, very much so.
It's the Cadillac, right? The issue with the program that, and I worked to expand the P-TECH program 5 years ago into New London Public High School, or the magnet school there, and Willimantic Public High School and Wyndham Public High.
Yeah.
The issue is it's a very expensive program. And so who pays for the dual credit courses really became a big issue when we tried to expand the program in its entirety.
Okay.
So I believe that there is a real big opportunity for the state to invest in dual credit programming. And we looked at a couple other states. In North Carolina, what their legislators do is they put aside, I believe it's $50 million a year for dual credit programming in their state. But the outcomes of that and the number of students who not only get a lot of college credit, some of them can earn up to 2 years worth of college credits, they dramatically decrease their student debt on top of that, right?
Correct.
So the funding really was the biggest barrier to being able to implement those programs. We've actually been speaking with Dr. Tracy Espy. She's the new president of Mitchell College, and she came from North Carolina, where they did a lot of those programs there. We met with some of her colleagues there. So that's part of the pathways conversation. One of the conversations is around structurally, how do you build out programming in school systems? But the other is, what types of policies need to be created to ensure that we have the resources and the ability to build out these programs, because the majority of them are resource constrained.
Yeah, I would just add to the point specifically about P-TECH, actually. We have in Connecticut a huge shortage right now of people that are trained for IT jobs, not just with IT companies, but all companies have IT jobs. And it's a challenge that the state needs to address, because it's going to really have a big driver impact on both economic growth and opportunity going forward. And there are 400 students in Norwalk in the P-TECH program with
Right.
Norwalk Community College. If it were up to me, I would scale that program. I would basically kind of have one of those with each one of the community colleges. And just imagine if we had 4,000 students actually studying computer science starting in high school, what a difference that could make. As Kelly said, it is a resource question. It will be very demanding resource-wise on the community colleges and the high schools. And we'll need to have kind of some level of business partnership. And P-TECH didn't happen overnight. It took time to build it up. But I think that's exactly the bold thinking we need to be, embracing kind of going forward.
Yes, 100%. And I love hearing that. I think the P-TECH program is inspirational, and it empowers kids. You can do this. They take the high school courses, and many of them are taking advanced courses in high school along with the Norwalk Community College curriculum. And they're graduating with a significant lessening of the student debt. And I think that's why this program is so beneficial to so many.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other resources that we're really constrained on is we don't have enough teachers who can teach computer science and teach those types of programs. And then talking to, the schools, we have a conversation not that long ago with the new president of UConn, and they're turning away over 100 students a year in their computer science program. And mind you, the teachers that are in their teacher prep program take computer science courses if they want to be computer science teachers. They're turning away over 100 students a year who are accepted into the program because they don't have enough faculty to teach them all. So there's a cascading kind of effect that we have to get all the way down to the root cause of certain things and then be able to kind of build from there moving forward. So in the programming that we're looking at now is, what can we do like immediately? What are the things that we can start to put in place to get kids into these programs? And then how do we build the programs back and make them more robust? So, what can we do next year for high school seniors? But then how do we build those programs down to juniors so they start when they're freshmen?
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Niall, are you still with us? I know you have another meeting to jump to.
Yep. No, Kelly, I'm still here.
Did you want me to take over the control of the slides for you?
I can stay on, Kelly.
Oh, you
I can stay on.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So the next step is a legislative recap. And I think Niall's going to give just a real brief overview. And then if there's any kind of questions that you might have, because as you said, with regards to the makeup of the council was really heavily driven by the requirements in the legislation, there might be some opportunities there moving forward.
Thanks, Kelly. And yeah, just to kind of briefly go through most of this, I think the implementer bill definitely had the most significant, I would say, legislation that was passed related to our office and the council. More of it just kind of codifying our office, locating our office in the governor's office for administrative purposes only. As we just mentioned, expanding the size of the council to additional members, basically doubling the size of it. Actually establishing the role of the chief workforce officer in statute, and reviewing and outlining her responsibilities, or the responsibilities of that position. And then ultimately outlining a series of sections on providing continuous updates to the strategic plan and ensuring that those updates are socialized with the legislature. So we'll get into this a little bit more in the presentation, but we are in the midst of preparing a more formal addendum to the strategic plan. And we will send that to you all for kind of review and consideration before it is actually published or finalized. So just know that is in the works, and we will send that to you all likely within the next few months, probably early Q1 of next year. But a lot of the larger initiatives that passed last year, some of which we have been involved with since the end of session, some of which we've had less involvement in. I would say on the left-hand side here, a lot of the kind of education provisions that were passed, we have not been as involved with since session. I would say we've been much more involved in the middle and the right-hand sections. That being said, I know that our State Department of Ed is certainly working through some of the FAFSA provisions that were passed, which I know basically alluded to each local and regional district enhancing or developing a series of programs that would enhance and increase FAFSA completion. I know that the department is working on that, and we can circle back with them for more of a comprehensive update, but I know that is in the works. I was just on the phone this morning with our CSCU colleagues about the auto admit provision that was passed. This is, I think, a really exciting program, and I know that CSCU is working through that. I don't know that they have anything to release publicly yet on the progress, but I know that they've had a number of conversations and are working through that. And just briefly on the CT Pass program that passed, this, just to refresh it, basically allows for additional organizations to access at either no cost or reduced cost transit services that must be, budget neutral at the end of the day. But it expanded the list of eligible providers beyond the kind of Connecticut colleges and state universities to, our private colleges, employers, nonprofits, additional, workforce organizations. So really to help kind of improve the quality and access to transportation. And we'll get into that more a little bit later in the presentation, because part of the Career Connect program that Kelly mentioned before has transportation access kind of front and center, because we've heard loud and clear that is an issue that a lot of people are facing. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then just moving over to the middle column, we'll get into the Career Connect, both the 40 million investment and the 70 million investment. Later on, that has been by far and away our largest focus area from our office. We are kind of laser focused on getting that program off the ground, and we're confident that will, based on recent approval, get off the ground, with applications launching ideally in the month of December, and then money coming out the door likely end of Q1, beginning of Q2 next year. So there's a lot of work that's gone into it, and we will go through it in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. But Another kind of exciting initiative that we've been working through is the Vocational Village program. And this really, the Department of Correction has done a lot of great work in terms of formulating an overall approach for this. There were some, I think, legal questions that had to be sorted through first, but we're confident that we can move forward with the program. There was $20 million through the American Rescue Plan that was aligned to this. And the nuts and bolts of it are really just increasing workforce training and certification opportunities for individuals who are either in the correctional facilities or leaving the correctional facilities. And OWS is playing more of a advisor role on this. As per statute, this is obviously a DOC-led initiative, but given that there's heavy workforce connotations, we actually just had a meeting last week with the department and are excited to formally kick off our kind of partnership with them. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on when we talk about our interagency partnerships that we're developing. But our goal here is to really make this a transformational program for individuals in the Department of Correction, and we really want to make it industry-wide, where we're not necessarily just focused on certain industries, but kind of broadening the spectrum and seeing how we can increase educational opportunities for the correctional population to be outside of the standard kind of certificate program and even into the associate's degree realm. So trying to really partner with our CSCU colleagues to make sure that we are offering kind of ample educational opportunities, not just shorter term certificates. We are also in the process of working through a overall plan to increase opportunities for individuals with a disability to really develop a stronger pipeline for them to access the workforce. We have a first draft of this plan prepared, and we are going through kind of final edits on our side before it's shared more broadly. But we are really excited to release this and ultimately work with partners to incorporate their feedback. This was, OWS's initial stab at something that we felt could be included. And I will say it's very high level, but we think it's directionally, would help this population significantly. And just to build on some of Kelly's previous comments, one of the new committees, subcommittees within the new DEI committee that she mentioned earlier is entirely focused on this population. So we really want to make sure that the people that we've recruited for that subcommittee are heavily involved with the providing feedback to this plan that we've developed. So we're excited to kind of work not only with that committee, but obviously additional individuals in the legislature and folks who just are passionate about this issue. So more to come, but we have developed kind of a first draft of this that we're continuously vetting. Then we have been, Kelly is one of the members of the Social Equity Council regarding the adult use of cannabis. There is actually a workforce development committee of the council that she chairs. We have been working on a number of different pieces with this council, but the two main ones I think to highlight for you all are one, developing a set of criteria that would go into the licensing applications for individuals applying for cannabis licenses that would basically prioritize developing a high quality workforce. So some of the pieces that we've outlined were how are you recruiting as a new cannabis business? How are you recruiting individuals from marginalized communities? Are you using Connecticut-based training programs to provide training for these individuals to enter the cannabis industry? Front and center equity is the underlying theme in all of the work that we've done with the Social Equity Council. So a lot of the criteria that we've developed for assessing kind of how they're developing their workforces are all around kind of recruitment into large, more marginalized populations, and then reinvesting in those populations continuously moving forward. So we are happy. We have to work within the confines of the Social Equity Council, but we will definitely be sharing that criteria more broadly for, again, feedback, review from all of you and additional committees. So we're excited to make progress on that front. And then the second piece on the Social Equity
Can I
Council.
interrupt for just a moment?
Yep.
All right, I know that Senator Whitcross has had his hand up, and I just want to make sure before you move on to maybe something that he wasn't had a question about. Senator, forgive me, but I saw if you want to jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Now, my question was when you spoke about the auto accept program and you'll be getting more information from the CSUs. I just want to make sure that I was a little discomforted to hear that we turned away over 100 students from UConn because we don't have the professors to teach the computer science. And so I'd be curious to make sure that under the auto accept, what programs the students are enrolling in, and making sure that if they've been enrolled, we're not falling into the same thing as, well, sorry, we don't have enough professors to teach that, so you're out. So that's data that to me is very important, and make sure that you guys can capture that when you report back to us again. Thank you.
That is a great point. We will definitely make sure that we have that sort of data. That's not been on our radar specifically. We know there's a massive faculty shortage across the state, across a number of industries, nursing being one, but also, to your point, in computer science. So yes, we'll definitely make sure that we follow up, and we'll get that information to you as we're continuing to flesh out that program. I will say more broadly, just on the faculty shortage issue, we are working within our Career Connect program to help not only provide training opportunities for unemployed workers, but also to provide in various industries, as Kelly mentioned before, manufacturing, healthcare, IT, but also the education industry writ large. How can we invest in alternative route to certification programs to help get teachers into the field faster, knowing that there is this impending and very real crisis that we're in. So just know, Senator Whitcross, that we are working on a broader strategy on faculty shortages that we're hearing. But to your point on the data specific to the auto admit program, definitely we'll circle back on that and make sure that we have that.
Thank you. And then, as a follow-up to that, maybe you can ask the different universities, what's the status of the professors that we have? Are they full-time? How many classes are they teaching? Are they on sabbatical? Are they, on a leave? I'd be curious to know, to make sure that we're getting maximum use right now, especially if we're in a shortage. And I anticipate another wave of maybe retirements this spring, summer. So we just need to be prepared.
Yeah, we have been working on a similar survey in the healthcare fields, going out to all colleges and universities on their nursing faculty. So I think to your point, a good opportunity to broaden the lens outside of healthcare and focus on additional industries with that. So that's a great point, and we will make sure to include that.
Great, thank you.
We hit a spot where we have a few more questions. So we'll send out some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay, so Representative Haynes, followed by Representative Exum, and then Senator Haskell.
Hi there. Just a quick question. Nyla, you had said that the Social Equity Council, who is chairing that?
Kelly, do you know the chairs, the multiple chairs that are on that?
Yep. The chair is Andrea Comier, and the new executive director is Ginny Ray. Her last name just escapes me. I'll get it for you in just a moment.
Okay.
And Andrea Comier comes from us she worked at CBIA, and then she was working on the implementation of the Family Medical Leave Act through DECD.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Representative, it's Ginny Ray Clay, CLAY.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Representative Exum.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I can't come on the screen, but I really have been following all of this work, and thank you so much for this update. I just have a question around the employment opportunities for people with disabilities, which I'm so happy to see has been carved out and very intentionally included in the work. As far as the report, I understand it's high level. When do you expect that we could see what you have been working on? I'm just curious to know when that might be released.
Yeah, absolutely. So a high level timeline that I could provide is at some point in December.
Okay.
We are very close, I think, to a first draft. And then at that point, it's getting it out to review and then kind of building out those items and starting to actually execute on them. So I think we're very close to a point where we can start releasing it for feedback. I feel pretty confident that December is a very reasonable, probably early December, to be honest, reasonable timeline.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. We've also funded through the CARES Act dollars a pilot program with the workplace focused on people with disabilities and minority women getting back to work in remote work. And so the program has really been around getting their skills up with regards to being able to work remotely, and then working with employers so that they understand how they can fit people into their organizations and the value of bringing people in. I think, the one thing that COVID has really done for all of us is accelerated, probably by about 10 years, how we use technology and remote work in the workplace. And so I think there's a huge opportunity that opens up for people with disabilities that we're really excited about.
Absolutely. And I also think as people become more creative in trying to fill roles right now, that we have a pool. I hear some people are hiring high schoolers, and I'm thinking if they can figure out ways to train high schoolers, I'm sure they can figure out ways to train other populations that may have been more difficult to think of a way and be creative enough in the past. So I'm looking forward to seeing the report, and thank you so much for including that into the work in this way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Exum, for your leadership on that. Senator Haskell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Kelly and Niall. It's great to see you both. I was really excited to see the workforce development for incarcerated individuals included in those priorities, and you said it's been a focus of your work so far. Just wanted to see if you might take a few moments to explain sort of what are the strengths of that system right now, and what are the shortcomings that you seek to that this office seeks to address.
Yeah, it's a great question, Senator. And so my initial stab, without my DOC colleagues on the line, would be there's a few kind of overarching issues. I think first and foremost is capacity. The DOC does not have a lot of capacity right now to be running ample programs for the correctional populations regarding workforce training and broader education. They have run really successful programs in the past, mainly focused on manufacturing and the trades. So I think there's an opportunity to think about staffing levels, appropriate capacity being provided to the agency to make sure that they have the actual individuals to help run these programs and facilitate them. A second kind of underlying piece, I think, is the industry focus. I mentioned this before, but like I said, traditionally, I think a lot of what's been focused on is manufacturing and the trades. And I think this program, there's a unique opportunity to broaden that pipeline. How can we be more focused on IT, for example, knowing that, there are some internet challenges in the correctional facilities, but I think those are things that, we can think through and try to address. But just more broadly thinking through how we can increase the industry focus that we're taking. And I think this program has a unique opportunity to do that. Thirdly, I would add, I think something I mentioned before was there's been a traditional lens of certificate and shorter term programs for the correctional populations. I think there is an opportunity to see how we can embed longer term educational programs like an associate's degree program, for example. Last year or earlier this year, actually, we spoke with Tennessee, who has done some great work kind of dropping their really standard associate degree programs within the correctional facilities. Obviously, Tennessee is a different landscape than Connecticut in a lot of ways, but I think the merit of including those type of longer term programs can be really beneficial for the populations in the facilities. So we're thinking through how we can potentially focus more on that. And then lastly, what I would add is just developing on-ramps. I think there needs to be more, and DOC, I think, is really aware of this and has done a lot of great work on this to date. But we need to get more hands-on services for inmates as they are transitioning and re-entering back out of the correctional facilities. A lot of the regional workforce boards, several nonprofits in the state have developed some of these services, but a continued emphasis, continued investment in those areas to really make sure that there is not a gap from when they leave and when they enter the workforce. It's just kind of one seamless step, so that they have employment opportunities waiting for them, they have housing waiting for them, they have kind of all of the basic things. So just 4 areas, but I'm sure there are a lot of others that DOC would chime in on, but those are all going to be focus areas of this program. And like I mentioned before, we had a really good initial meeting with DOC last week after we've sorted through a lot of the legal issues. So we're excited to kind of ramp this up, likely Q1 of next year.
Spectacular. We could go on and on about all of the sort of opportunities there, but perhaps we can continue the conversation offline. And thank you for that really helpful summary.
Now,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say thank you, and that I would love to follow up.
I just have one quick question that you might end up answering, and it's just about demographic data for participation and completion in the Career Connects program. If you're going to get to it when you get to it. Just want to make sure we answer that.
So I would say 2 things. One, we will touch on that later on in the program. We are taking a very intentional focus on the individuals that we're going to be serving through Career Connect. Representative, if it would be helpful, we can provide demographic data on programs that we've already funded. So not Career Connect, but from existing coronavirus relief funds that we've been operating through the first 12 months. That will give a good directional indicator, I think, of how we typically try to structure the workforce training programs. So happy to provide that data to you all, and we'll certainly touch more on the Career Connect demographics later on in the presentation, but happy to provide that with you all if that would be helpful.
Please, thank you.
Great. Okay, well, I know we're starting to come up on time. So I just briefly on the right-hand side, and then I think it's probably worth moving on to the next section. Kelly alluded to this earlier, but we are developing in partnership with our Office of Higher Ed, a credential registry system. This was codified, I believe, in the implementer bill last year or earlier this year. And the goal here is really to have a centralized repository where we would all credential programs in Connecticut would get uploaded. So it really is a one-stop shop for students and job seekers to access a robust series of data on all of those programs. Right now, the Office of Higher Ed maintains a program inventory that is not, I would say, comprehensive in its focus. It has a lot of programs and it has a lot of good data, but we know we can do more. And we know we can not only expand the remit to include apprenticeship programs, to include, private colleges, a variety of nonprofit workforce training providers that might be on our eligible training provider list. There's a whole slew, I think, of additional programs that we could highlight that, serve thousands of people every year, and also provide more data. So historical outcomes of those programs, the cost of those programs, what are the educational requirements to enter those programs. So we felt like we could really provide more information. So that really was the central tenet of building out this registry. And we've started uploading to it. There's technically not a a front end yet that is accessible by the public, but we are actively working through designing that so that this will be available for students, job seekers, employers, teachers, really the whole gamut, just to make sure that everyone is aware of the good programs that exist. So broader update here is we're working on this. We've made a lot of good progress, but there's still a lot more to do. But we will be actively working on this with our Office of Higher Ed over the course of next year and building on the momentum that we already have. So if there isn't any more questions, I will probably turn it back over to Kelly. We have a section on broader updates on the specific strategic plan initiatives from the Governor's Workforce Council. So Kelly, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Niall, for that and all of your work that you've done on those initiatives. Here we've just highlighted, a couple of the key accomplishments. I touched on some of these as I went through the update on the strategic plan. But to date, we have launched 8 regional sector partnerships. We've done this with the help of the Next Gen Regional Sector Partnership Group. It's being funded through philanthropy, their 2-year engagement to help launch these programs. Really important to get this right because they are going to be self-sustaining over a period of time, these really robust groups. So we've built a working group of over 10 IT employers to develop more exclusive skills focused hiring practices. As I shared with you earlier, they're really making a concerted effort to go through their job descriptions and change their job descriptions to be skills focused rather than credential based. We're working with Advanced CT very closely. We have a liaison that supports our team and their team around workforce development. I think workforce development issues is the #1 issue of any company that's looking to come to Connecticut. They see that we have a great workforce already, and the strategic plan has really been a driver for businesses being interested in coming here because they see that plan as a really comprehensive, really focused role that the state is playing to ensure that we continue to enhance our workforce development systems. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. And I've made many presentations to these companies as well, and we're going to continue to support them moving into Connecticut. On the sector-based training, as Niall mentioned, we did deploy $15 million in CRF funding last fall and into this year. Well, yes, October of 20 into this year. So we're wrapping up some programs now. We've trained over 1,300 people in manufacturing, IT, healthcare, construction, CDL licensing, and a bunch of other smaller industry sectors across the state. I think the success of that program was really around the amount of case management and supportive services that we were able to provide. Our completion rate is higher than the average. I think we're in around the 92% completion rate. And as I said, we've worked very closely with the community colleges to reorganize some of their training programs so that they can be short-term and be more effective programming for the program participants. We'll get you the demographics, but over, the majority of the participants are from underrepresented populations. So we are taking lessons learned from those funds and those programs as we are developing the launch of our Career Connect program, which will administer the 70 million in ARPA dollars and the 40 million in state bonding money. And we're looking to train approximately 8,000 workers over the course of 3 years with those funds. Again, we've been working very, very closely with the workforce boards and with the community colleges. And our goal here is the community colleges being one of the primary program providers And the nice thing about this is that we're taking these federal funds and the state funds and kind of recycling them back through the public system. So we're benefiting the community colleges in being able to fund these short-term training programs through them, and increases their revenue, which is important for their programming as well. And again, we've developed a really robust working group around these educational pathway programs. Our goal is to identify and engage 9 school districts working in cohorts of 3 as a minimum, and working in a cohort with the school systems instead of as an individual school system really gives us an opportunity to build collaboration, sharing of best practices, streamlining the resources needed with regards to all of the planning that goes into these partnerships. And then again, launching this policy kind of working group that stands next to it to ensure that we have the support needed to develop these programs. Next slide. And then, we shared with you all the work that we did around the barriers to employment and the data and accountability. So we're working very closely with OPM and DAS on our data and accountability work. And again, the collaborations that we're having between state agencies, I think, is around workforce has been very central to the work that we're doing. We already went over the DEI committee, and so the next kind of section, and if you have any questions on any of those initiatives that I shared with you, happy to answer them. We'll also can send you this slide deck as well. The Career Connect update. We've sprinkled this throughout, but a little bit more specifically. We have been working on an application process on an application portal. We've been working very closely with the regional workforce boards on designing what these programs are going to look like, looking at how to best allocate funding across the different industry sectors, ensuring that we have things like the state intake portal, that we have the opportunity to do marketing around the program so that we have broad outreach to ensure that all of our community members have an awareness of the opportunity and are able to enroll. We're looking at awarding, taking really a statewide approach where it works. So taking the manufacturing pipeline program, expanding that across the state, using that as a best case example of how we can expand programming such as IT and healthcare across the state as well. The great thing about IT training is that you can be anywhere, you can teach it from anywhere, and you can be anywhere as a program participant. So we don't necessarily need to have every one of the community colleges being an instructor, but we could have a statewide program. So those are some of the things that we're working on here. And as Niall mentioned, we will be opening up the application portal sometime in December. We'll be making funding decisions in March and April, and launching dollars soon after. We've been doing a lot of background work on this so that we can ensure that we're going to have ease of implementation, such as working on the contract template and getting approval from the AG's office to the template so that we're ready to go when we're hit the ground running on the launch of these programs. It's super exciting work. Again, making sure that we really reach out to community organizations who really can tend to be the boots on the ground, especially with regards to working with special populations and underserved populations, to ensure that they are connected to these funds and to this programming, and that we're bringing together the workforce system as a whole and building a system that is very robust. So again, the work that we're doing with the 5 workforce boards, we've gotten a lot of collaboration amongst them that we haven't had in the past. So they were awarded a $10 million H-1B grant last summer. It was the first time that they had gone after this grant as a state. In the past, different workforce boards have received smaller allocations, like a $3 million allocation, but this was the first one going at it this way. And I think the success of that application was we had 76 letters of support, which was unprecedented for any grant application the state of Connecticut has ever put in. And it showed the workforce boards how collaborating amongst themselves and coordinating programming amongst themselves has not only been successful for their region, but other regions and statewide as well. So we're using those principles with regards to Career Connect. Now, did I miss anything that you wanted to highlight here?
No, Kelly, I would just emphasize, you know, and I'm actually going to bring up a new slide that I think might help just a little more, just the overall kind of timeline here that we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, you know, right now we are focused on, you know, releasing this initial tranche of funding, which is 61 million. But there will be additional pieces to highlight and funds that will be released. As Kelly mentioned before, this initial pool of funding is really focused on kind of getting unemployed people back to work, or people who, and those who were affected by by COVID back to work. But we know that the buck doesn't stop there. And we have the second tranche of funding, the 40 million in state bonding that was invested, that, you know, we don't have access to that yet. It will be drawn down intermittently, but you'll see some of the focus areas at the bottom of the slide here for pieces that we think we are anticipating investing that 40 million into. And that is ranging from kind of incumbent worker training, you know, people who are already employed and need to earn additional skills, supporting the work of our DEI committee that Kelly mentioned before, investing in SNAP ENT workforce training programs. These programs are, you know, run in our community colleges, but focused for individuals who are SNAP eligible. And we can actually realize a 50% reimbursement from the feds if we invest in these programs. So a large financial upside to investing in those kind of programs. You know, investing in additional transportation solutions for individuals who are going through programs. So things like that. We want to supplement the initial ARP investment with additional investments that are more flexible given the federal restrictions that we have on the ARP money. So just nothing major to add, but just, you know, there's additional pools of funding that we're trying to braid with the 61 million that we will be starting to allocate beginning of next year. And Kelly can get more into the details of the programs in some of our other slides. But Kelly, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, an important point here is the ARPA dollars have a very specific use. And the state bonded dollars are really going to be important to fill in those gaps. So such as incumbent worker training. The Manufacturing Innovation Fund has allocated incumbent worker training dollars that have been extremely successful. There's a 50% match from employers. And the average employer the cost to upskill an employee is about $650. And they've done that by being able to have different companies come together and kind of share training. And instead of one company saying, I'm going to train, you know, 50 people, you have a bunch of companies saying, I have 2 or 3 people in these content areas and sharing the expense of that, which has been really cost effective. But one of the really key components of our Career Connect is not only getting people the entry-level skills that they need to get into a new industry and a new job, but to work with companies to ensure that that's just step one for those employees and that we're going to continuously upskill and reskill them. There's also things that happen, you know, in those first few months of employment that sometimes become a barrier. So say someone's car breaks down and they don't have the money to fix it. I know as an employer, I've always been giving out loans to my employees to fix their cars so that they can get to work, right? But there's no fund set aside, and not all employers do that. So as we're working, with employers and with our philanthropy partners and understanding that there are certain things like that if we can just help them overcome that one last barrier, that they're going to really be able to engage with their organizations in the long term. So being able to fund some of those things that will continue to be a barrier just until they kind of get started in that gap is really important. And one of the things that we're also looking at is a recyclable evergreen fund, right? So there's people who may not be eligible for some of these programs at no cost because of the amount of money that they make, but really would benefit from this upskilling. So this would be a place where they would be able to repay a portion of those dollars based on how much they earn over a period of time. So that's something that we're just socializing now and starting to put together what that could potentially look like. So there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening with this state bonding deployment that I think is going to really stand up and support the ARPA dollars.
I just want to jump in really quickly. We have about 25 minutes left. I'd like to just open it up to questions really quick, and also just, I think we all have a hard stop at noon, and I think my Senate co-chair needs to leave shortly as well. So I just want to take a quick break, and it looks like Representative Ackert has a quick question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kelly and Niall, just thank you so much for this presentation. I do have a couple questions. You had mentioned the marketing component with businesses coming to Connecticut, that we have a skilled workforce. Do you believe that, is there any showing that, that substantial amount of job openings actually deter companies from coming to a state? Or, because I just something that when, Senator Whitco, I look at my neighborhoods and there's not wherever you go, whether it's a heating metal company, a plumber, the restaurants, does that play into that at all?
We haven't had so much of it being a deterrent from my understanding. I mean, this Advanced CT is really the agency that works more closely with them. But a lot of the conversations have been developing a flywheel. So like in Stanford, the IT companies in Stanford know that the more IT companies that come to Stanford, the better applicant pool that they're going to have. And they're looking at, people being able to start in one company and learn something and then move to another company and upskill. And that kind of flywheel, once it starts circulating, really builds momentum to their workforce. And I think a lot of companies IT companies are looking to come into the Stanford area because of that. So, and those companies are also extremely engaged in helping build the workforce. So it's not just like, I'm coming here, give to me what I need. It's I'm coming here, this is what I need, and these are the things I can do to help you. So for example, Synchrony built a new training center at their facility. They pledged to spend $30 million upskilling their own employees, and also have reached out to us to ask how we can help them deploy another $20 million to upskill people in the Stanford region that are not going to come to Synchrony, right? Just to make sure that we have a pool of applicants. We have Tata Consulting that came. They want to work on helping upskilling teachers and hiring kids out of job training programs in IT. So they're really like digging in and wanting to get involved in being a solution to the question. So our goal here is to look at what is the immediate need, right? What do we have to do today to get people back to work? But then how do we build out a comprehensive workforce system from, preschool, to retirement? And what are all of the kind of the components of that look like along the way? And then looking at our workforce boards, the workforce boards have done great work, but they do work in their regions. And so what we've been doing over the last, year is we meet with them weekly, and we're really been talking about how do we be a little more comprehensive in the approach for some of the things that make sense, right? So there are certain things that are always going to be really regional. Tweed Airport is going to need people to do their expansion, and we're going to continue to support those programs. But on these bigger initiatives that really have a statewide reach, how are we more cohesive? And how do we make sure that people don't fall out of the gaps from one region to the next? And how do we take best practices that all of the workforce boards have and make sure that all of the boards do everyone else's best practices and their own, right? So that they're really sharing in the work that they're doing, that they haven't really always collaborated at that high of a level in the past. Not that they don't collaborate, they absolutely do. But just looking at how do we make that more cohesive and how do we make that the norm, and what kind of like systems and procedures do we put in place so that it kind of happens there and we're creating that system.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's Kelly. And I have two questions. I'm going to ask them at the same time so I can shorten it up a little bit. And I'll ask them together. So one is the, Build Back Connecticut. Primarily, I'm looking at the infrastructure component of it. So we're going to get a lot of money from the, federal money coming to the state on infrastructure jobs. And that's very comprehensive, mostly construction-based jobs. So how do we fill that need? Are we going to be prepared for that money when we get here? Are we going to have the workers? Are we setting up a training process ahead of that? And secondly, my second part, not second part, but is the $1,300 that you invested and got people trained. The completion of 92% is fantastic. Are they working in the field that they got trained in? So that's the results-based information that I want, is that if we're spending money, supporting them, getting them trained, are there job slots for them? So what percentage is actually working? I'll let you go on those two, and I thank the chairs for their indulgence, and it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up infrastructure, because that is really an important conversation that we're having. So I have been working closely with Keith Brothers from Building Trades Association and Joe Toner. I've gone to, they have an annual meeting that I went to. We're having conversations on how do we ensure that they get people into their system and they do the training and they have funding for training. They have funding for a 40-hour kind of pre-apprenticeship training program. The conversation is that's a great program, and we definitely need to support and expand the number of people who are going in that program. But then also, how do we make sure that we have enough people who can work in very specific jobs that need a certification to do? So one of the programs that we funded with the CARES Act dollars that were 100% completion and 100% placement was an energy efficiency certification program. So the recipients got, I think it was like 5 or 6 state and federal certifications that they needed to be able to go into people's homes and improve energy efficiency in their homes and do that work. So it's important that we support the building trades as a whole, and we give them the funding and the recruitment and wraparound services support that they need. We also have to make sure that we're looking at all of the niche kind of industry infrastructure sectors that also need training. So having robust conversations with them. And the one thing that we're doing with the Career Connect funding is a technical assistance piece. So I'll be able to work with the different applicants and help them put their programs together in a really cohesive way so that we're funding the overall broad needs of what is happening, and that the stakeholders that should be involved in each of those programs are involved. So yes, a lot of work done there. I don't have the training, the placement data on the top of my head because people are always being placed. So the number changes, but we will get that number back to you very quickly.
All right, looks like no other questions, so go right ahead.
Kelly, I'll pull up the last couple slides on Career Connect and we can wrap up with that.
Great. you want to talk through these now?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So just in terms of eligibility and allowable uses for these funds, again, some of this is dictated, well, really all of this is dictated by the guidance from the feds on the allowable uses side. On the eligibility side, we are having sort of three main eligible partners to apply for the grants. These are the regional workforce development boards, just a broader category of nonprofits, and any institution or consortia of institutions of higher ed. Now, we, as Kelly mentioned, are really focused on getting additional collaboration through this. So we are kind of, in the guidance that will be formally released, we are heavily emphasizing that applications include partnerships with these other entities that we've outlined here. And the goal here is really to ensure that an application before it is submitted has really all of the key applicants or key partners identified. So while a regional workforce board could be an applicant for the funds, they would, we would be looking to see if they have employer partners signed on to the work, making, commitments to either interview or hire individuals who complete the program, training providers at the ready, who would actually be doing the technical training. Some providers would be doing, more professional skills training. So again, we are looking for, and I would add a point on the statewide collaboration. We are fully anticipating getting a lot of regional proposals, which we by no means will not be considering for these funds. But we do want to see where we can realize economies of scale and have, institutions collaborate before they submit an application to do something across Connecticut and not just focused on one region. Obviously, we know there are very specific regional needs that we will be sure to address and fill with these funds, but we do want to make sure that there's kind of ample encouragement and facilitation of statewide proposals. And as we mentioned on a previous slide, we are allowing larger grants for statewide proposals. So we have, I think, up to 18 million for statewide grants for the largest grant application size, and up to 3 million for regional applications. And then just in terms of the eligibility, I think most of what you see here is, derived directly from the federal guidance that was released. We've gone through, not we, but just broadly, our Office of Policy and Management has gone through what we think is permissible uses. And this is sort of where we've landed for now. The nuts and bolts is really, we feel confident that training and a lot of the wraparound services that are really necessary for the successful deployment of training are permissible expenses. But other things like, redesigning processes or doing research projects, building technology systems, those we don't feel are permissible based on our interpretation of the guidance. I will say this is sort of a running activity that we're doing. So, but at this point, we feel confident on sort of the allowable uses that are outlined here. And again, this will all be published on a website that we're developing once the application goes live. Just briefly reiterating some of the stuff that was mentioned before, timing. Our goal is to release applications in December. We're giving applicants a window where they can submit their applications at the end of February, and then again at the end of August. Our team will review the applications that are received as soon as that window closes. And we'll, once we've reviewed all of the applications, we'll start making announcements on funding decisions. So likely funding decisions will start being released in March or at the latest April. But we're really going to shoot for March. And then that will be recurring, that kind of twice a year cadence, both at the end of February, end of August, will be repeated until our funding is depleted. So just know there's kind of 2 windows each year. And our office will be both having a technical assistance team, which Kelly mentioned, will be working with the applicants on the front end to make sure they're kind of putting forth strong applications, and then a review team, which will be more, all internal folks that will actually be reviewing and making the funding decisions. And obviously, for conflict of interest reasons, those are very clearly separated out teams, and one will not be doing the other. And just finally, a question was brought up earlier on demographics, and I think this is the high-level scoring criteria that we've developed on how we're going to be evaluating programs. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I'll maybe just focus on kind of the top 3. The first one, first and foremost, our highest weighted category is were the individuals impacted by the pandemic, and are they from a historically marginalized or underrepresented population? So we're leaving it pretty broad, but we're definitely looking for individuals from our BIPOC communities, our reentering citizens communities, people with disabilities, people from traditionally underserved regions in the state. So this is not just a population, it's also a regional approach. But if we're not seeing that kind of front and center in an application, that those will be the target participants, that will significantly take a knock in terms of our scoring. The other just top 2 that I would mention are, again, are they collaborating with partners on a multi-region or statewide proposal? Like we mentioned before, we're really trying to get larger statewide proposals rather than smaller regional proposals, but those are by no means mutually exclusive. So I think we're really just trying to, if we get multiple proposals from the same region for the same, focus, it's very possible that we would ask those people to collaborate for a future funding consideration. So trying to just foster collaboration, really building this collaborative and not competitive workforce system. And then finally, does the recognized credential or training program that would be run aligned to the current employer demand? And we're leaving it up to the applicants to define that, but we've kind of laid out a couple guideposts, leveraging the regional sector partnerships that we've developed, which again are these consortia of employers, to define whether, or to confirm whether the programs are in demand, or providing some level of economic or labor market data that would define in demand roles right now. So happy to answer any questions on the other metrics or the first 3 that I mentioned, but just given that we're coming up on the top of the hour here, hopefully that provides some additional clarity. And one just last thing I would mention is we will be setting up just kind of stakeholder engagement conversations, and we have the legislature as a big constituent that we want to socialize this program with. So we'll be working with obviously the different committees and getting this socialized more broadly. So just be on the lookout for additional notifications about additional times where we would be socializing this more broadly.
All right, looks like we're gonna have a question from Senator Whitcoast. Real quick, will you be able to send these slide decks out to our committee? Both sets?
Yes, we will be able to send these slides. We just on the last slides I presented, we'll need to just, they're going through kind of final review right now, but we don't anticipate that we shouldn't be able to share them. So we should be able to share both.
Okay.
If
yes,
you could send them to me so I can post them on the webpage, it would be appreciated.
Will
Me,
do,
Jeannie, the
Jeannie.
clerk. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Niall. Thank you, Jeannie. Okay, Senator Whitcoast, go right for it.
Thanks, Josh. Niall, my question was on the point criteria. You had item number 3, which was worth 25 points, had to do with does the program meet the needs of the workforce demand from employers? And I don't know. Could you explain what the rationale why that was rated as the 3rd point when I get the COVID thing, but this is a blip right now in our workforce history. Why would we not make the number 1 priority with the most points awarded, making sure that whatever curriculum is out there, it's what our employers are saying that's what they need to hire these people in the good paying jobs. I would think that my sentiment would be that would be number 1, but could you explain to me why we didn't do that or rate that a little bit higher on the scale?
Yeah, I'll offer a primary reason, then I'll let Kelly weigh in as well. But I think given the legal constraints on the funding that we have to deal with for the rescue plan, that was the main reason why we have the COVID impacted weighted higher than demand. Traditionally, the programs that we ran in the past, employer demand is always our first and foremost criteria that we evaluate things by. But this is a bit of a, you're right, it is a blip. And, unfortunately, there just are some legal restrictions that we have to work through when administering. So we just want to make sure that people know the restraints that, they have to go through from an application perspective.
Thanks. And that makes sense. That ties back to my question originally about the affirmation that, we got the blessing for the ARPA funds for this. So, okay, thank you.
Right.
I think to your point, though, we will be looking for those letters of support, and the letters of support and commitments are part of that requirement. So it's not just, yes, I have commitment. It's prove that you have commitment and who is committing. So, and that's part of where the regional sector partnerships come in as well, is it's the place where we have a regional sector partnership to plug in and get those commitments. But more broadly, like in healthcare, we don't have any healthcare regional sector partnerships, but we're convening many working groups around healthcare and what's needed. And actually, we have a large healthcare meeting in a half an hour that we're going to be socializing this plan with as well around state agencies that need to hire healthcare workers as well. So your point is well taken. I mean, it's the the train and pray model is out of the past. It's making sure we're connected to jobs.
Great. Looks like no other questions. So if you want to finish up, we got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank all of you for all the support and the feedback that you've given us over the last year. It really has shaped the work that we have done, and that we will continue to look to you for your feedback. Our group is small but mighty. There's been only 3 of us really since we started. We had 4 for about what felt like 5 minutes. Our 4th is coming onboarding this week. But our budget is very small. We took a 50% cut in our line item last year from a $500,000 budget to a $250,000 budget, which does not cover the cost of 2 of our salaries. So it's important as we start thinking about the role of workforce and the work that we're doing. We do have $500,000 of WIOA funding allocated to us. We would really love to use those funds for programming purposes, not to cover salaries, which is what we have to do now. And unfortunately, the WIOA funds do not cover fringe. So what you see in there is basically doubling of the salary to be paid through those WIOA funds. So as you know, we're thinking about the initiatives and the things that we want to do here. I think it's important to think about the resources that we have to be able to do what we do. And I have to say, without Mark and the social venture partners and the people that he's been able to pull in to help us with these initiatives, we wouldn't be where we are today. So, our volunteers are many and they're wonderful, but in the end, our team is accountable for the work that comes out of the Governor's Workforce Council and the Office of Workforce Strategy. So again, I want to thank you for your support. I want you to kind of just keep that in mind, I think, as you're moving forward and thinking about additional things that you may want our office to focus on. we really don't have the bandwidth to add anything new to what we're doing without additional resources.
Heard. All right. Any other questions from anybody else on the committee before we go? Any other final comments, Senator Slapp?
Well, I appreciate everybody's time and the thorough presentation, and I think we've identified already some tweaks that we'll be working across the aisle to make in terms of the council representation with legislators. So we'll work on that and some other things, and always open to your ideas. So and hope everybody has a great holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Witkos, anything from you?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm good. Thank you.
Representative Haynes, kick it back to you. We can end it there.
All set, everybody. Have a great holiday. Thank you.